The following conversation discusses a number of topics. They include, but are not limited to, role models, the loss of friends in society, workism, the perception of a college degree, masculinity, and much more. This episode features Ant Diandrea. Ant started his journey of learning health and fitness when he enrolled in college as a nursing student. He ended up leaving school to start earning certifications of his personal interest. Ant is currently a certified personal trainer, nutrition, and lifestyle coach, and a certified mental wellness and emotional eating specialist from the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. While he continues to overcome and battle his own trauma, Ant strives to be a living example of what it means to take control of your one life and own health, guiding others on their journey of personal excellence, live the life they've always dreamed of, and become the happiest and healthiest version of themselves is what drives Ant to continue spreading his own experience and insight into all things mental, physical, and spiritual. You can follow Ant on Instagram at Ant Diandrea, Ant_Diandrea, and join the Grit and Gratitude community for free on Facebook. If you enjoyed this conversation and the content, I please ask you to 1. Follow Ant Diandrea and join their community, but 2. Follow the page on Instagram at Overcoming the Divide and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Ant. Pleasure to have you here again, man.
Oh, dude, I'm so happy to be back, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate you creating the time out of your busy schedule to have me on.
Of course. So, for the audience's benefit and people who've recently tuning in, Anne has been on the show on a number of times. I actually believe twice. We
Mhm,
discussed the vaccine, the rollout, the handling of that, and the approach by just society and the government. And we also
mhm.
discussed on a larger kind of panel international affairs with a few other people, Pat Carolyn being one of them, who has also been on a couple episodes. So feel free to check those episodes out. But and if you don't mind, could you just briefly reintroduce yourself to the people who are tuning in and haven't really paid or watched or listened, I should say, to those previous episodes?
Yeah, 100%. Well, so I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, which is where I met Dan at. Um, and back in 2019, I ended up dropping out of school. I became a personal trainer. Um, uh, became a Went to the Institute of Transformational Nutrition to become a transformational nutrition coach, and there I got my mental wellness certification for mental wellness and emotional eating. And then from there, I created my own business, helping people with their nutrition, their lifestyle. I have my own Facebook community called the Grit and Gratitude Community that I run with my girlfriend, that we're posting every day, trying to build a community of like-minded people striving for what we're talking about, like personal excellence, being the healthiest, best version of ourselves. And then I'm a personal trainer on the side as well. um, yeah, I take health and fitness pretty seriously. I got a race coming up, two races coming up in the next 2 months that I'm training for, and yeah, man, I'm feeling good, just taking things day by day.
To hear and love to have you here again. So today's focus obviously different than the prior two episodes, going into more of what you specialize in, which is physical and mental health and those pursuits. So I think just as a more of the abstract kind of conversational point, but it's becoming more and more, I would say, popular or more and more prevalent in society, which is what do you think about the loss of friends in modern society? And just as a reference point, the Survey for American Life, I believe it's called,
Mhm.
so, been conducting surveys for decades. And in men specifically, but also women are just as affected by this, just differently, but still are in some capacity. But with men specifically in this case, the number of men who said they had no friends, no close friends, was only 3% in 1990, which is still like not the best, but it's 3%. Now
Mhm.
that number has increased to 15%, fivefold, all the way, I think, now dating up to in the past 3 decades, now
Mhm.
in 2020 or 2021, I believe the data is from. How do you think that factors into like larger macro factors that are at hand and that people kind of see just every day?
Well, dude, that's actually a great question. So when I went to when I got my certification in transformational nutrition, when people hear that, they may think of like the physical aspect, because when we think of nutrition, we think of what we're eating. But what I was learning in there is how our livelihood and our lifestyle is like a three-leg table, right? Because we have our physical health, we have our mental health, and then we have our spiritual health. And just to preface, like spiritual health and religion, two different things, right? It's not like you don't have to be identifying with a specific religion to pour into that spiritual bucket. But one of the things that play a huge role in your spiritual health is your relationships. And it's your relationships with yourself, it's relationships with a higher power, with nature, but especially with other human beings. And I feel like nowadays, like I'm not surprised. I hadn't known that statistic, but I'm not surprised by it due to like just like how polarized things are, how virtual things are now. The lack of in-person interaction can definitely play a major role in that. But I feel like it's one of the like one of the most important things to find people that you identify with, that you align with, and that can just that feeling of community. You know what I'm saying? And that's actually a big reason why I have the Grit and Gratitude community, because I realize that when people begin to change a little bit, change their habits, change who they are and what they do, and prioritize different things, that they lose a lot of the friends that they had growing up. And so having a community aspect, especially for men, man, like just the aspect of, like you're saying, not many men are willing to come out and just talk about that stuff. Like, hey, I feel lonely. I don't have a lot of people to rely on or to talk to. Um, but I feel like now that the problem is becoming worse, it's shedding light on different solutions that we all can play a part in solving.
Yeah, and you hit on like two things I was about to segue into, so appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, the first one is that with people getting more involved, you see like what people label as hustle porn and just that obsessive culture of just getting after it, nonstop grind, getting up at ridiculous hours, even though both of us I think prefer that, but still just doing ridiculous things that you don't want to do or you may not want to do, but you're doing it out of like this pressure. And I found a different term for it, which is called workism. And it's
Mm,
basically the belief that work is not only, I'm just reading from the definition, that work is not only necessary to economic production, but also the centerpiece of one's identity and life's purpose. And
mhm,
I'm I'm pretty intrigued by maybe a uptick in that because if you look at a Pew Research study conducted, I don't know if you saw this one, it touched on values and it touched on like five different values. They were religion, patriotism, community, having children, and money. And
mhm.
it asked like whether those values were very important to people. I'm sure there's other options too, but
Right.
the people who said those five things were very important, all of them decreased the number of people percentage wise who said they were very important to them, except for money. That went up.
Mm,
So I think that kind of like ties into things that relationships, people may like neglect relationships because of this existential pressure to prioritize other things such as money and
mhm.
success. And I want to get your thoughts on that before I continue.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, again, I'm definitely not surprised by that. I feel like the problem, like, as we see across the board with all different chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, depression, like all of these things, like they're all skyrocketing. And I feel like a lot of people will look, with the skyrocketing rates of mental illness in the country and throughout the world. I feel like a lot of people think that money can fill that void. And on my perspective of money, like I'm not gonna lie, dude. Like I value money like at a
Hmm.
very high level. Like I want to obtain wealth for myself, for my family, to give back to the planet and to the world and environment and society and everything like that. However, I also understand that money isn't gonna solve my problems. It's not gonna. What it is, it's like an amplifier, because there's a saying in the Bible where it's like the root of money. People say like the root of or the love of money is the root of all evil. Um, and I want to emphasize the love for it. They're talking about the greed aspect of it. So money itself is not the root of all evil. It's the love of it. When you're giving other things up, like you're saying here, like when you're giving up the relationships and giving up other things and your morals, that's when it becomes, that's where evil stems from. But really, my perspective is like money's just an amplifier. Like whoever you are now, money's just gonna put a megaphone to that, right? If you're not a great person, money's gonna amplify that. If you are a great person, money's gonna amplify that as well. And instead of looking at it as like a solution to heal a wound or to fill a hole, because
Hmm.
I mean, we even know it, man. You see all these highly successful people that have smiles on their face, and then the next day it turns out that they committed suicide or something along those lines. And I mean, I don't know these people, but to me, it's just like it's proof that no matter how much money you have, if you're trying to fill a hole, that hole is going to be endless. Whereas you have to heal on
Hmm.
your own, and then when money comes along with that, it can amplify the good that you're trying to spread. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's a great call out. With I think with the workism and the hustle culture to like there's a balance to everything. I think there's a balance to even discipline. And for example, you want to be disciplined, you want to say work out 6 days a week, but say 6 days is burning you out and you just ignore it because the grind can eventually like take yourself out by an injury caused by that overworking of your muscles. So that's just one kind of like layman example to put it as. But yeah, and I really like that amplifier thing that I don't like I agree, but I think that money can almost like not change the person because it's like what are your values, but as you said, like brings out the person. So if you don't have those defined values, then almost the money can dictate. And when you have all that money or have all that success, say it comes to you and you don't really know who you are, then you could be obviously become something that you didn't originally intend to.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And
That's a good point.
mhm,
That's a good point that it can, if you're not like set in stone with who you are, it can bring out a side of you that you didn't even know was there. So that's
for
a great
sure.
point.
And regarding the part with just men being more open about it, I want to provide this anecdote because I think it's also applicable, which is I months ago back, I was talking to a friend about it was Jordan Peterson. People who've like listened to me know like I don't agree with them, especially as of late, some things, but overall I think net positive of person easily. So there's that. And someone was saying, like, why do you like him? And I was detailing that I believe he, has very like good structure for people to live by, men and women, and also he provides encouragement to men, which I think young men in particular, regardless of race and background, they just need more of. They need more encouragement. And my friend, who is a woman, she replied with, "Wait, what?" Like very surprised and taken back by it, and kind of went this argument, but it really stemmed from this doubting that men actually need more encouragement or men that like need help. And you see more and more now, it's acceptable to say that men's mental awareness, men's mental health matters. But it's almost like when you call out the issue itself, it's becomes like, oh, do they really?
Mhm.
And I want to part of that anecdote because you're talking about like men just being more open about things. But in that moment, trying to be open about with certain people, I think there's still that kind of that hesitancy to really buy into it. Like the
Mhm.
buy-in isn't there. And this, I like to preference these kind of topics, but this isn't a call for anyone to be a victim. I hate playing into like the victimhood mentality. Like women suffer a lot with mental health too. They actually try to commit suicide at a higher rate than men. So
Yep.
there's that. It's just they do it through like pills and
Mhm.
it's not as effective, say, than a gun. But not to get derailed here, but more so just to call out this isn't like a victimhood thing and like put the spotlight, but it's an issue. And I don't like when there's double standards and the lack of knowledging an issue. So I was wondering what your experiences were with that running into maybe like that doubtfulness when you're trying to talk about things and people on the mental health side say of men just are like, nah, I don't really buy into that.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, men have, there's like that stereotype, and I guess like, all people say like all stereotypes are rooted in some truth,
Mm-hmm.
that men tend to be less emotional, less vulnerable. And when I was first started to get become vulnerable with it and like talk about it, it was a little scary at first. And one thing that I want to I want to build upon what you were saying in regard to like the victim mentality. Like when I share something publicly, it's never in something like woe is me. Like, oh, like feel bad for me or yada yada. I try to use it as an inspirational tool for other people and other men to think about their own problems and their own situation. And I mean, I went through a lot of trauma when I was a young kid. Death in the family and bouncing around
Mm.
from house to house. I started raising myself at 12, and if I would have just continued to ignore my emotions, I would not be nearly who I am today. Because I would just be, I mean, it's like just like the typical Philly type of person. Like I'm like going to the same bars, always drinking, fighting. I was not on the best of paths,
Mhm.
and it took me a second to take a step back and realize that, like, when I get drunk, I would get aggressive. That would lead to fights. And why am I doing that? Where does that stem from? And the more I started doing work on myself and becoming aware of those things, the more clear in my head that I started to feel, and the more confidence that I would have to share. Because it's not like I'll share something on social media or share something with a group of people to just gain sympathy or empathy or that victim mentality that we were talking about, but it's more so to be like, hey, like, this is what I went through, and this is what I'm doing to get through it, and it's actually helping me. And
Mhm.
maybe it can help you too. And
Yeah,
that's the way I go about it with all types of situations. And it's important to iterate. Like, everybody's unique, everybody's different. We
for
all
sure.
have different biology, we all have different lifestyles, we all have different priorities. So what may work for me may not work for you. Um, but it's still putting that out there so that you would have the information to at least go try it, and maybe it will help you.
Mhm. And when I say victimhood, if I misspoke, let me be clear about that too. I meant like for myself, because
Hmm.
being in like, I think single men are like the highest in that range for. So that's my demographic right there. It's like young single men. So I want to make sure like people are like, all right, this isn't like the pity party for the host Dan Corcoran.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
right,
yeah,
right,
just
right.
wonder
Yeah, great.
that's how I like to preference it.
Yeah, same page with that.
So where do you see yourself like operating in this space? Where do you think your value really comes in? Because we get together on back in Philly good bit, workouts together, brunch, whatever the case may be, and just the conversations that we had like offline and everything like are very helpful. Even like the FaceTimes we do time to time. So
Mhm,
where do you think your value and like the space you operate in kind of like plugs into that mental health side
mhm.
of things?
Absolutely. So one thing that I realize is, like, I mentioned the mental, physical, and spiritual
Uh
health,
huh.
and like all of those things are connected, right? They're all intertwined. Like, if you improve, one area, you're bound to improve another area. And just to put it in perspective for you, like, one of the things that happens with obesity is inflammation, right? And it's not just an inflammation in a certain part of the body, it's across the body. So I'm actually taking a, course right now at it's called the National Academy of Sports Medicine for a weight loss specialty for personal training. And one thing that I had just learned is that when somebody has obesity, they are more likely to have a mental illness because their brain is inflamed. And then you take into consideration that if someone is on an antidepressant, their risk of obesity actually increases by 60% typically. And so when you think about that cycle that it's put in, well, if you help somebody remove one part of that circle, you can stop that cycle from occurring, right? And so where I plug in with helping people, like, first and foremost, like, a lot of people will come to me just for a physical goal. One of my awesome clients, his name is Joe. He came to me. He's like, "Listen, I'll lose 10 pounds. I'll take part. I'll do it for a couple weeks in the summer, and that's that." And since then, he's lost 30 pounds, put on 10 pounds of muscle. He, after he did those physical changes, which are apparent, then you talk to him and you realize, all right, well, now his finances are in order too. He changed jobs. His priorities are switching. So you begin to learn. Um, you take learning lessons from health and fitness and you can implement it into other areas of your life. And especially when you take care of your physical health, then your mental health starts to improve as well. And that's what I experienced. That's like, I started lifting just because I wanted to look good. And
Yeah.
then I was like, wait, I feel really good when I
Hmm.
finish lifting or when I finish running. And it's like, oh, well, now I'm fixing my diet and now I'm actually seeing more physical results, but I'm actually feeling even better. Like, what is this all about? And I started to learn more about it. And I guess that, like, that's what my, like, I guess what I'm passionate about and where I where I fit into the solution to the problem is to really just help people realize that your physical health and your mental health are connected. And like there was even a study that was published recently from the University of Southern Australia that found that exercise, which most people do for the physical aspect of things, is actually 1.5 times more effective than therapy and other leading medications at helping people handle their anxiety and depression. And when you think of it that way, like exercise is something that you have 100% control over. If you don't feel comfortable doing it in the gym, that's okay. Do it at home. We all can go on a walk. We all can do some. And granted, this was a resistance training session, so it
Hmm.
would be like push-ups and squats at your house or sit-ups. But when you think about it in that aspect of things, it's like, why not try that? Why not
Yeah.
do that and not have some of the negative ramifications that may come with the other options of things, and just like, hey, this is something I control over. It's free because I can do it in my house. Um, and let me do it consistently for a couple weeks and see how I feel after. And then we go from there. But yeah, if I ever ramble, just tell me to shut it.
No, no, I
It's
wrote a
good.
lot of it down, and it's uncanny how what you're saying, like in this point and previous point, ties into just what I wrote and some of the excuse me, some of the statistics I wanted to pull.
Mhm,
Which another one was the number of prescription drugs to teenagers from let me look at 2007 between 2007 and 2017 increased by 59%,
mhm,
which is wild, and that's by Pew as well.
mhm,
And it was for people who, oh wait, that's the wrong one. That was the number the number of prescription drugs from 2015 to 2019 rose for teenagers for 38%. But
mhm,
that same number, to tie in, not make me look like a big idiot, was that number of 59% between 2007 2017. That 59% was the number of teenagers who recently experienced depression, also done by Pew. So I think both, and I kind of want to tie like that in, which is, do you have concerns with, and we're both like not exactly qualified, but you more than me, like, do you have concerns with kind of this prescription first maybe model that some psychiatrists may approach with, or doctors, or whoever the medical professional may be, instead of some of the things that you point to, such as exercise, whether that be anywhere? So kind of less invasive, less expensive, don't have to take a drug. Like, generally speaking, that's probably better if you don't need to take a drug to alleviate a problem.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, like I mean, like you said, like from my perspective of things, it's like I mean, I just feel like our healthcare system is really a sick care system, and it's more of a business aspect of things. And I know you and I had the conversation, but for the people listening, if they've never checked out the Joe Rogan episode with, his name was Brigham Bueller. It
Hmm.
was episode number 1873, and he was in the the big pharma model,
Yeah.
and talked a lot about just a lot about what goes on inside that model and why he ended up leaving and going a different route. But I just the one of the greatest things about like what you do, Dan, and what we have access to now is just listening to other people and listening to experts in the field who share these things. And and whatever I say here, like, don't take my word for it. Like, look it up, type it in, figure it, like, look
Hmm.
into it yourself, so that you can, so that just like if people don't know me, they may not believe me. But if you go look it up yourself, you're more likely to believe it because you're reading it with your own
Yeah.
eyes. But if you go look, like, with these companies that we talk about, I mean, you can look up Pfizer and Nigeria, what happened there in 2000. You can look up Merck and Vioxx and what happened there in the early 2010s.
Hmm.
Johnson and Johnson with the opiate epidemic. And what ends up happening is that with our government and with these pharmaceutical companies, they'll be responsible for like medical malpractice, or responsible for medical deaths in the case of
Yeah.
Vioxx.
Hmm.
And
50,000 or so, I believe.
yeah, but yeah, up to 60,000 Americans died. And there's a doctor, I forget his name. I believe his name is Dr. Abrams. He
Hmm.
was I listened to this guy. His name's Sean Stevenson, who his podcast is the Model Health Show, and he's a health and nutrition expert. And he brought on this guy, Dr. Abrams, I believe his name is. I can double check that. Who is actually there, like on the board or at the hearing for the Vioxx case, and shared that they even knew that it was going to cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was internal emails that was shared that they understood that the drug was going to cause harm, but they said do it anyway because we're going to make our money from it. And then you take into consideration that they just get a slap on the wrist, they get a fine for that, and they walk away with billions of dollars to then funnel in to advertisements and media. And are the United States and New Zealand are the only countries in the world that allow pharma to advertise direct to consumer. And even in New Zealand, they have strict regulations in regard to that.
Mm-hmm.
But here, majority of our ads are from pharmaceutical companies. You listen to a radio or watch the news, and it's like brought to you by Pfizer every other word, and it's a business. And to be clear, like I just want to be on the same page with everybody. What my certification is to help people like in mental health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certified to work with your doctor to help get you off of certain mental health medications. Please don't listen to this and just stop whatever you're taking, because that is the last thing that Dan or I would want, because there's some extreme ramifications if you abruptly stop a medication. So I'm not advocating for that at all. But what I am saying is that if you do take that, or if you don't, no matter which way you are on the spectrum, just try these things. Try exercise. Try certain things that we can do for our diet that we can dive into if you're up for it, and different habits that you can implement so that we can give our body what it needs first. Like an example is this, like you're familiar with omega-3s,
Mm-hmm.
omega-3 fatty
Yeah,
acids.
no, we had a conversation before.
Yeah, so there's a certain omega-3 fatty acid. It's called DHA, right?
Mm-hmm.
The actual phrase is super long. I can pronounce it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's beyond the point. But there was actually a study done at the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that said increasing your DHA content, increasing your intake of
Mm-hmm.
DHA, excuse me, drastically improves our memory and our ability to focus. Not only that, but if you are deficient in DHA, if you are low in DHA, it actually correlated with brain shrinkage, right? And so if your brain shrinks, well, the part of your brain that influences our perception of things, our emotions, that shrinks as well, which is not a good thing. We may not know that, and we may turn to a prescription which may not address that root cause. So it can take care of it may take care of the underlying cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it may, and I say may because I was just listening to another guy. His name is Dr. Double checking myself, Dr. Christopher Palmer, who has been a teacher at Harvard, a Harvard professor, and he was involved heavily in weight loss. And through that, funny how we're saying
Mm-hmm.
that everything's connected. Through that, he got really big in the mental health world and the mental health industry. And he shared recently that there was a study done that if you throw the gold standard at everybody, right? Someone comes in for depression and you're throwing the top medications, you're throwing in like therapy and different things like that. Only 10% of those people will see a complete reduction in symptoms of depression. So that means it completely reverses. They're not depressed anymore. They're good to go and they're walking down the street as happy as can be. Now that means 9 out of 10 people that are coming to look for some type of relief, right,
Mm-hmm.
are not finding the relief that they're looking for. And this isn't the doctor's fault. This isn't, as we'll talk about, or as people will hear if they listen to the Bring on Bueller podcast, like our medical system is filled with people that care, nurses and doctors and people that are genuinely there to help. But one thing that Sean Stevenson says is if you're a world class person, if you're world class in education, but you're educated in the wrong thing, then you become world class in the wrong thing. And that's not the person's fault. It's the education that's down. And who funds the education for our nurses and our doctors? Big Pharma. And if they're the ones that are dictating the education, then how can we expect the nurses and doctors to know any different? And so it's not their fault. we just have to do better at one, having people like yourself, people listening to these other, Max Lugavere is a big one, Dr. Daniel Amen, Sean Stevenson. These are all people that I'm really tuned into that share their research, share the studies, detail it, make it simple for you so you can understand. And then when we take control of ourselves, um, a lot of good can happen. And to come full circle, like I just believe that if we, you know, I do feel like it's a problem to go to medication first. My perspective is we should be medication last type of thing. Try getting sunlight in the morning.
Hmm.
Try exercise. Do all of these things. Wake up and go for a walk in the morning. Try out the gym. You know, eat healthy. Fix your gut. Stay hydrated. Help fix your sleep. There's all of these different aspects that I help people with that really do play a role in our overall health. That if we took that into consideration, I would believe that a lot of our problems could be taken care of if we all did that.
Got you. I want to like shift a little to like pop culture and that influence too,
Hmm.
because something I was thinking of recently was I wish I had more time to get data on this if any out there exists, but we think like, about the influence of pop culture, but also the popularity of just being depressed. And when I say popularity, almost that contagion, like in the 90s, I believe it was, there was like social contagion, it is, of anorexia with, I
Hmm.
believe, like girls specifically. And do you see that almost with just feeling down? And I see that a lot with music. Like the amount of sad music, even I'll listen to, is just like through a number of artists and groups is crazy. Like it's good songs. There's a reason why people listen to it. But I was just thinking about imagine like, you have to at least consider that having headphones in, listening to music, talking about, breakups, loss, suffering, anxiety, depression, sometimes even suicide, blasting in your ears minutes throughout the day, hours even. How would that not have like an internal effect?
Hmm.
And to provide like an anecdote to it, this one group that I like a lot called Friendship, their most known song is Capsize, and which is the only song I think the audience may know of. Regardless, they were in the DC area. I went to see them, and they have like sad songs. It's not depressing, I would say. There's more of a distinction, but
Hmm.
I got to meet like one of the group leaders, I guess, one of those artists of the band, one of the singers, and he was saying like it's just okay to be like sad sometimes, like about the music. Because I was saying I was a fan since like 2016. And he's like, yeah, we like the work we do, and it's just good to know that spread that message that it's okay to be sad sometimes. And I completely like resonate and agree with that, but I thought about it for a little while, and it's it's almost like becoming popular or not popular, like this contagion just to be sad and not be better and not kind of go out in the world and get this. And this is something I'll say, especially for men. I heard this from the Chris Williams podcast, which is, and he heard this from like his like friend group and people he encounters, and he boiled it down to this: like in this world, it seems like at least for men, this is an immutable world and you have to change towards it or to it, meaning that who you are and being good yourself, it's like no, you have to adapt like values, which I'm not saying is wrong, but for women on the other end, it's like you're great the way you are, you're like empowerment, you're perfect, this world is what has to change, the world is what's wrong and you're what's great. And I kind of
Hmm.
see that. I like when I heard them, like I feel like that's generally true, and I think people who are at least trying to approach it or at least understand how that could be interpreted. I'm not even saying that's wrong on either side. There's obviously some good points to be taken. Like, yeah, people, there are deficiencies, people need to be better. But at the same time, there's also things that you need to like change for. It's just weird. And I
Hmm.
just want to get your thoughts on that. And to tie it back to like the sad music thing, that kind of like popularizes being just down and not trying to be better because there's not that encouragement. And that to tie in the encouragement piece too, there's not that encouragement. I think for everyone, just young people in general on that front. But
Hmm.
yeah, and yeah, that's when I shipped over to like the pop culture because I think I see that a lot more now than like before, and especially in music.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And one of when I talk about nutrition, it's everything that you consume. So you consume nutrition, but you're also consuming what you read, you're
Mm-hmm.
consuming what you listen to, and that's why, the overwhelming part of media is a lot of negative headlines to grab your attention and to sucker you in, and it's this side or that side. And then in the music, it's a lot of like once you said that, dude, I was just listing
Mm-hmm.
off different songs and like artists in my head that I listen to that are when you listen to the lyrics, you're like, damn,
Yeah.
what? You're like, this is kind of dark, like.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you're listening to that over and over again, like you're going to be bound to think that way at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got the people like Jim Rohn and Oprah Winfrey who say like you are the average of the five people you hang around, like hang out with.
Yeah.
And I think that's because you're all sharing ideas, you're all communicating. So if you're, the examples, like if you're in a room with five millionaires, well, they're talking about finances and what they did to get there, so it helps you get there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a room with five people who are alcoholics, well, that's what they're talking about. So when you are talking about something or thinking a lot about something, you start to move in that direction. And I try to be very specific about what I listen to. Now, to be fair, when I'm on a run, when
Mm-hmm.
I'm lifting, or when I'm lifting, I try not to have headphones so I can talk to people if they need help,
Mm-hmm.
which is the gym music. People at these big box gyms need to fix their playlists.
Yeah.
But regardless, when I'm listening to music on my runs, like I find that I gravitate more to the sad stuff. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's like Linkin Park and Kid Cudi and things like that. And then when I'm more so just chilling at home, it's more like country music, which I find is more like upbeat.
Mm-hmm.
But I became aware of your point. I became aware of that, and I started changing the music I listened to. I used to be big into rap and the pop culture and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that, and I slowly have started moving away from it because of that reason. I'm like, these songs are just, I'm like sitting there bumping my head to these dudes talking about shooting each other and going through
Mm-hmm.
breakups and being depressed and popping pills, and it's like I don't need to listen to that. I got enough on my
Yeah.
mind. I'm cool. And then to your other point, was the guy I forget who you said was talking about?
Chris Williams, I believe is his
Okay, Chris
name. Yeah.
Williams. Was he saying more like, just to make sure I understand, like
Yeah.
men should more so try to mold themselves to the current culture, whereas women should be empowered to be who they are and like trailblaze type of
Yeah,
thing?
that, and it's Chris Williamson. I'm just looking him up, so I'm correct. Yeah, Chris
Okay, yeah,
Williamson.
Chris Williams.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's basically the point. He used the word immutable, which I think, so I just want to use his language, but
Mhm.
yeah, and that is essentially the point, that you're like the way you are and the things that you like, and you hear this too. So let me play into this point. Like there's obviously some issues that men exhibit, like behavioral issues. Like men can do absolutely terrible things. Like that's very obvious. No one will never defend like those types of behavior that are more common in men too.
Mhm.
But by that same token, you also see men get attacked for just liking old fashions and say cigars and
Mhm.
nice handcrafted material and products. And this is
Mhm.
like so insecure masculine. Like I deleted Twitter and it's been a great choice. I stand by it. And I'm
Mhm.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a better kind of decision making. But
Mhm.
I before I deleted it, pre that moment, I remember seeing someone buy. It wasn't a buy; it was like a verified account. Excuse me, commenting saying like this the amount of insecurity in this video of is crazy. It's just exactly what I described. Just men, I think, on podcasts drinking like scotch and smoking cigars. Like
Mhm.
so that's the point I'm playing at. That the things that you like and the things that you may be drawn to, it's like no, that they're not good enough. They're not good. Who you are isn't good. You have to change. And then on the women's side of things, it's you're great, you're fantastic, empowerment. And I don't think there's anything exactly wrong with that side. The thing I would just disagree in is that there's deficiencies with everyone,
Mhm.
obviously both men and women. You have to address those, and you can't play that as a strength, or I think it just be overall detrimental to your growth as a person. I only
Mhm.
think that needs to be said, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, more so on the men part. Like I don't think there's exactly something wrong with the women messaging. It's just on the men part. It's like you're not good enough. What you may like isn't good, and it could be quote unquote toxic, such a hyper used word and buzzword. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that latter point.
Yeah, man. I mean, when I think about it, like I think what people refer to as toxic masculinity now is just what masculinity should be.
Hmm.
And in regard to the fact of
Yeah.
conducting yourself in a presentable way, in regard to yourself, like hanging out with guys, like you said, like smoking a cigar or having a scotch, like why not?
Hmm.
Um, Having conversations with other guys that understand where you stand and where you go through, and guys that you're comfortable with. I think that's important. And another aspect of it is like I think guys, one of the innate desires that men have is to protect and provide. And if
Yeah.
you want to have that, like fulfill that desire of protecting and providing, well, then you got to take care of yourself. And I know for myself, I was called I was told I was toxic masculinity because I was advocating for going to the gym.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I vehemently disagree because I feel like going to the gym actually helps you get physically fit, but it actually helps you be in charge of your emotions more, which I think is a very masculine thing to do. Where because I feel like men and women are just like opposites of each other, and opposites attract, like the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Like women are more emotional, more nurturing, and more caring, whereas men are more willing to do the hard work. Not saying that women aren't working hard, but you don't see, many women.
Construction workers, yeah,
Yeah, right,
service
right. When
industries.
the whole thing with Ukraine happened, they said the men have to stay
Yeah.
because the men are
Yeah.
willing. Yeah,
Hmm.
right. Because they accepted the women that wanted to stay, but they said the
Hmm.
men between this age and this age couldn't leave the country because we need all hands on deck
Yeah.
to protect the country, to protect and provide. Um, and I think that having, like, I mean, you already brought it up, like taking care of yourself, no matter what, no matter if you're a man, if you're a
Hmm.
woman, is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves, for our families, for the people around us. And in regard to like I don't know, man. I feel like the whole like you're not allowed to like this and you should fit in with society. It's like, well, we're all our own unique individuals, and I think that's what's cool about all of us. Like we all have different interests, we all like different things. Like
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know how I don't know, like for me, I love Marvel Universe, right? And if someone's like, oh well, that's weird, like you can't, it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like I like it though, so you don't have to watch it with me. We don't need to talk about it. We can go do something different. You know what I'm saying? So like
Hmm.
I like what I like. I'm trying to be the best guy, the best man, the best person, first and foremost, the best person that I can be. And I feel like if everybody just strived to do that, had the humility to put their ego aside and be like, all right, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
Accept responsibility for everything in your life. And I'm a big proponent of that. Extreme ownership with
Yeah.
Jocko Willink. I think that's a great
Hmm.
book and a great concept to abide by for everybody. Just to, if there's something in your life that's wrong, well, it's your life, so it's your fault, and
For
then
sure.
that empowers you to go do something about it.
Yeah, I don't think, at least personally speaking, the worst feeling to me is when there's an issue and I just can't do anything, feeling that I can't do anything about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Like hopeless,
yeah, exactly. It's just despair.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I wanted to tell you, kind of add on to that point you said with the protector and provider part, because on the same podcast, Chris Williamson, he detailed, and this happened in 2012 with the Aurora, Colorado shooting at the premiere of The Dark Knight Rises, I believe it was.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
it had like a Bane mask or something on or something.
I don't know if he was wearing a Bay mask, but yeah, maybe. And he came in to the theater, started shooting, and in the theater there's three guys with their girlfriends, and all three guys, went on to like put themselves on top of their girlfriends, like push them into safety or push them down to safety, and all three men died, but all the three girlfriends survived. And I think
Mhm.
that plays into that protector and provider part, almost like instinctual. I doubt they had enough time to like, should I do this? Like, is this
Yeah,
is this girl worth it? Like, we've been on 3 dates. Her family kind of sucks. I'm not
mhm.
really sure if it's like, no, it was probably instinctual. It was probably natural. Like, I doubt they really considered protect like that through and through consideration
Right.
of
It was like, there's
protecting
a
them.
threat. I need to protect this person, and then
Hmm.
yeah, 100%.
Exactly. And that's not everyone, but that was them. And as That was a great. I never knew that. And there was a CNN article written all about it. I mean, it's going back like 10 plus years ago, but
Yeah.
I decided to read more about it. And yeah, it's a very sad but then heroic story of
Mhm.
like actual masculinity playing out in society in
Exactly.
the face of evil, danger, and tragedy, actually like going that extra step. And
Mhm.
it was just like weirdly like beautiful. So I think that just
Mhm.
plays into your point of like
And
that protector and provider. But then there's also people out there who would, for some reason, have this natural reaction to like attack that and go after it, and like maybe not that instance, but really just go after the masculinity thing of just being protector and provider.
mhm.
Because I don't know, probably insecurity of theirs, but it's become
Right.
more popular.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I feel like if anything is like toxically masculine, it would be the person who's carrying out those acts. You know,
Hmm.
the not it's not the guys who decided to protect their girlfriends and put their lives on the line to save the people that they were with, but it's more so the person that because people always say like, oh well, they had mental health issues. It's like okay, but if you had addressed those issues, there was a study done. I gotta find it. It was in the same podcast with the guy, Doctor
Hmm.
Christopher Nolan, I believe his name is. Um, and they were talking, Palmer, sorry, Christopher Palmer.
Hmm.
And they were talking about how there was a study done where they took prison inmates, and there was prison inmates who had their some of their needs satisfied with like omega 3s and with a multivitamin, and they had a placebo group that were given something, but it wasn't. It was just like a sugar, like an
Yeah.
empty. And they were monitoring their violent behavior, and it ended up that the people that had their nutritional needs satisfied is 40% less likely to conduct a violent crime or can
Hmm.
participate in the violence. And I feel like when we neglect that side of things, when we neglect our health, it can cause a little bit of a haywire up here. And to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, like if you're depleting your body of these nutrients, if you're not moving your body, if you're on a pharmaceutical drug and all these different things, well, there's a lot going on in our body that we're not used to, that we're not
Hmm.
used to at all. And I feel like we could look at that and be like, all right, well, if anything is toxically masculine, it's that, because they're the ones that are not in control of their emotions.
Hmm.
They're not taking care of themselves, and instead of accepting responsibility and having extreme ownership to change their life, they're just taking their emotions out on other people and thinking that person's to blame or that group of people's to blame, and then carrying out a heinous act.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just yeah, I feel like it's like a weird. I don't want to say weird. It's just a different perspective on things that,
Hmm.
like you were saying, if you were sitting there in a suit smoking a cigar and you have a
Hmm.
nice physique and you're having conversations and you're
Yeah.
confident, that's toxically masculine.
Hmm.
I don't know. I just feel like it's flip flopped, right?
Yeah. And that's why I don't really respond to that term. Like people who use that term, I kind of depending on who and the context is huge, and the who's saying it obviously matters. But a lot of people who use that term, I think, are just bad faith actors. Like they really do. It's not. They're not going after toxic masculinity, quote unquote. They're going just after masculinity, but they're putting toxic before it, so they have a reason to go after it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I really don't see their kind of true intentions because they won't call out about most people. It really does depend. But in my experience, what I've seen, these people will not call out like some of the statistics that we point to that lack of men having friends and things like that, and some tackling issues, and also not that college is the one all ticket for success, but talk about disparities in college admissions in spring or fall of 2021 or spring of 2021. It was a 60-40 split between men and women, 40% of freshmen being men, 60% being women. You
Hmm.
don't hear that ever being talked about. And not to say that you need to go to college to be successful or be happy. That's not the point. But that people look at that as kind of this qualifying factor. There's a reason why people are advocates for affirmative action in like higher education. I mean, it kind of stems from the same thing. And not to
Hmm.
say it should be based in gender. That's not what I'm saying, but I think it's more or in any kind of identity criteria, but just looking at the why, like why is this happening? and not to
Mhm.
blame anyone. I think a lot of times with issues too, with any kind, like it's your fault. Like with white privilege, for example.
Mhm.
I don't spend much time on that because I don't see what it, like does. Like let's talk about historic disparities. Let's talk about systematic injustices and how can we reduce those and eliminate and erase those from our society. Like
Mhm.
why are you gonna come at someone's group identity because they're just being treated, it seems to in your case and in your opinion, respectfully.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's kind of like my things on. But I would like to hear your thoughts too on the college and what I detailed before as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when people bring those things up, I think it's so silly that we're, this far into it and we're still talking about who more melanin or less melanin in their skin,
Mm-hmm.
and let's judge them for it, or let's pay for reparations for something that happened 200 years ago when neither of us were alive for it. I just think they're very like surface level issues, and
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate our conversations because we always dive deep on, just like we were talking about, things that we can control. Like, dude, I'm a little more
Mm-hmm.
brown than we you and I have no control over that. So
Yeah.
like who cares? You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like it doesn't, like, just the color of your skin, or the gender, like that's not, it doesn't define you. It's not who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
focus on the things that you can control and be a stand-up human being. And I would find it interesting to find out more about, like, why that disparity is happening. Like, why
Yeah.
is it, like, because I don't know if this is true or not, but I believe like admission overall is going down more. And
It
I don't know.
is.
Okay. And is it, like, I guess, is it more so just like
It's
less,
less. Mm-hmm.
it's just less in general, and then the
The less
actual,
people. Yeah. Uh-huh. So
right,
if you just looked at like incoming classes, so use like 10,000 people for incoming freshman class at a large university, say 6,000 of them would be women, 4,000 would be men,
right,
basically.
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I was thinking, the first thing that I thought of is more of like the trades.
Mm-hmm.
Men may be more willing or open to go into like a construction job or a union job, or something that's more labor intensive, like working with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be very interested to find out more about that and even break it down. I'm going to look into it myself just because
Yeah.
now you piqued my interest.
Mm-hmm.
But even just like, what majors are these people going for? And because I feel
Yeah.
like that plays a huge role into it. You may know that already. But I feel like you're gonna say something.
No, I don't know. No, no,
Oh,
please
okay.
continue.
My bad, my bad. I feel like
No,
you
you're
had something
good.
to say.
You're good.
But just like interested in the aspect of like um, what majors are people more so going to now? Is there a difference
Mm-hmm.
between the genders in regard to what major one goes to over the other? Or
Yeah.
yeah, just like the reason, because I feel like, I mean, it's the same thing in health. It's the same thing really across the board. Like, you have to find out what you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. You
Mm-hmm.
have to understand the problem and what's causing the problem in order to provide a solution to it. Because if, you know, like, one big thing is like that I like to talk about is, if someone has a mental illness, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something there's something a part of the brain. It's called the HPA axis, that is a communication network with your brain and your kidneys. And if there's something wrong, if your brain is perceiving something, which is like depression, anxiety, if it's perceiving something wrong, it's going to communicate to your adrenal glands to
Mm-hmm.
release stress hormones, like put yourself in the fight or flight mode. And if you're given an anti-inflammatory because of that constantly happening, it may shut off. It may help with that inflammation, but it's not helping the cause of the inflammation. So the cause is still there. So now it's
Mm-hmm.
these two things fighting against each other. When if you just address the root cause of the problem, you wouldn't even need this to be fighting it, because that would shut everything else off. And it's the same thing with what we're talking about here. Like, if we can figure out what is actually happening,
Yeah.
and how we can even balance that out if that's something that we wanted to do, or however, whatever we want the solution to be. We just have to know what we're going against first in order to provide a solution that could move us toward that thing that we're trying to solve, or that vision, that end goal
Mm-hmm.
that we want to go to.
Yeah, I was trying to find that question too, while obviously listening to what you were saying,
Yeah.
which I did see like skill trades from NPR. Skill trade programs are booming after college enrollment dropped after the pandemic. But I mean,
Mhm.
that's obviously good, and that speaks to something that it's not just people aren't doing nothing.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
right. 'Cause it's the last
yeah,
thing that we need right now.
yeah, exactly. And this has, but but I guess the concern there is like this trend of college dropped enrollment has been a trend for like the last like 40 years, I want to say.
Mhm.
So obviously gradual, but still noteworthy.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I want like don't someone could easily look this up and fact check me if I'm wrong. Please do and let me know. But I'm pretty sure like the number of like there's a certain number of women too who want to date like men that actually have a college degree. So that's like a
Mhm.
social perception of the college degree. It's nothing wrong with that one. It's more or less that social perception of what having a college degree means. I don't think
Mhm.
it's really accurate, but it's like that. It's like a symbol of status in some
Mhm.
regards, you know,
Mhm.
and people use that as like, oh, higher paying job, stability, maybe educated. Like none of this I really believe is accurate or mutually exclusive to college degrees in any capacity. But it's like that social perception of it, of which has been like established for quite some time. This isn't just our generation. I think
Mhm.
going like you could get out of like say the I believe it's like the Vietnam War, get a certain like the draft if you had like a certain GPA. So it's kind of just putting the F is, and that doesn't exactly illuminate my point to the best, but
Mhm.
what it is doing is basically saying this very high focus on the importance and vitality of having a college degree for success.
Mhm. And I
So,
think one thing that I think of too is I think that was very like very that I think that belief stems
mhm,
from, decades ago because that did
yeah,
hold a lot of value because
yeah,
it was more difficult to be able to afford to go
mhm,
to college and get that degree and be able to build your life in that aspect. And I'm sure people can pull up the exact numbers and everything now, but if you compare the average income for an American versus the average cost of a 4-year university,
mhm,
you would see like the average income may be going up and down, but on an incline, whereas the cost of a university like skyrockets this way.
mhm,
And I even know people that I talk to people that are in their 40s and they're like, "Oh, I'm still paying off student loans." And
yeah,
I think that's one of the worst, not one of the worst. It's one of the most heartbreaking things for me that you
mhm,
know someone can walk into a bank at 18 and say, "Oh,
yeah,
I want to go here," without really knowing if what they want to actually do, what major they actually want to go in, and they get approved for tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes even
yeah,
hundreds. I got a,
mhm.
a couple friends of mine that are in the hundreds and thousands of dollars of
Oh my
student
God,
debt, and it's like I don't I don't even know how you're gonna get out. Like I don't know.
you
I
can't
just don't know.
refinance it. You can't like
Right?
bank. You can't declare bankruptcy on
I
it.
was just gonna
Uh,
say it's unforgivable. So no matter what, that's always gonna be attached to you. And I don't. I just don't understand. Like I'm sure you would know more about me than in that aspect of like why they made it unforgivable or what the whole logic is behind that. But it's just like heartbreaking to me that
mhm,
people, um, someone at 18, like it was like, hey, dude, like high school you have to raise your hand and ask to go to the bathroom and then you're taking it and then a couple months later you're taking out this fat loan to go to a
yeah,
college you don't even know what you want to do with the rest of your life potentially so maybe some people do um, but if you have that
I. Mhm,
made that got job set in sight that major that you want and you're willing to work hard for because no matter what it is you have to work hard
mhm,
that's the biggest thing like there's never going to be an easy route and I believe the easiest route is the one that pays the least benefit down the line
mhm,
um, and that if you want it go for it you just have to work for it and it's going to work out if
yeah,
someone wants to I'm working with a client who's in school right now to be a trauma surgeon she's 17 so she's in high school she's um, shadowing a doctor on the weekend. She's an EMT. Like she's doing all of these
that's
things to put herself there.
17.
17 years old,
That's
man.
wild.
And to me, it's amazing. I'm like, damn, I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep going. You got to work hard. I'm like, you
Mhm,
get into school, focus on school, and bust your ass in school so that you can get there. It's just a matter of knowing where you want to go, and then just knowing what you got to do to get there. And if you're willing to do it, go for it. Like you got to do
mhm,
it.
for sure. And I think that point of that and making more holistic and well-rounded and informed decisions about what that debt could do to your life post graduation or post college is just in points of role models, which I think again see a lack of. Like you have superstars and you have Hollywood stars. You have like Dwayne the Rock Johnson. That guy's like awesome, but like, and even like like these people are becoming more and more like less like you can't identify with them. They're becoming more like I don't know if grandiose is the right word, but glamorous in some way. Like you can't like identify with them, and that's why I think just having role models and mentors, and it doesn't have to be official mentors. It's not like oh you're my mentor, but people you look up to who are responsible, and like a parent is obviously like could be huge, but people are hesitant to go to their parents at like younger ages for obvious reasons. So
Mhm.
I think having that and like pushing that more in, like the culture, pop culture of things, people who have their life together, they're not ridiculously like say wealthy or they're not like some superstar. They're just someone who like figured things out by like the hard work and life lessons and a lot of failures. So you don't
Mhm.
have to make those same mistakes. Like I remember hearing like the Jocko podcast with jujitsu. I think Rogan was saying this too. The people like they're like teenagers now who are 18 who are just absolutely insane and skilled in jujitsu. And the reason they were saying the reason that is because they learned off like the backs of these legends and these people who made those mistakes. So they don't have to go through those same trial and errors. And
Mhm.
that's the thing with the role models I think could provide is the people like who made those mistakes. Like, I mean, I'll use my dad for example. Like he was so keen on me not obtaining like these mass amounts of debt because a mistake he made. And he's pretty like a great person to go to with finances. So that's just amazing for me, but not everyone has that luxury.
Mhm.
And if I didn't, I could probably easily would end up taking more debt or doing something stupid, just doing something that
Mhm.
an 18-year-old would do. So I
Yeah.
think role models is a huge part, like parents being one of them, but also having people in the culture who are not like too far out there, not glamorous, but really have or grounded and just have things figured out.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing, dude. Like, I mean, the two guys that I really got tuned into and started like modeling after
Hmm.
is Andy Frisella for the
Yeah.
business discipline entrepreneurship aspect of things, and then for health was Sean Stevenson. Like my man reversed an incurable disease through health and nutrition when he was 20 years old. When he was our age, 20,
Hmm.
22 years old. Obviously, we're a little older now, but just being attracted to those guys and then using their platforms, they had
Yeah.
podcasts and things like that. Like I never, at the time, I never met them in person. Like I've met Andy Frisella in person a couple times now, and um, I just use those guys as mentors. That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, like I didn't have like my dad passed away when I was 10 years old,
Hmm.
so I was trying to look for someone to look after because
Yeah.
there were other things in my life that was happening, and it seemed like every father figure I had was just going down the drain. So I was like, what? It's like, what can I do? Like, who can I look for? Who can I look towards? And Grace's dad played a big role, but also looking at these guys, like, all right, I would love to be in Andy's shoes business wise. I would love to be
Hmm.
in Sean's shoes health wise.
Yeah.
So why don't I listen to those guys and learn from them and how they got there and what they did and what I can do, cut
For
my
sure.
learning and then potentially even do it better because that's saying what one man can do, another man can do better.
For sure. And I think that speaks to what you said, like domains. And I don't think there's anything wrong with seeing what someone does and how they do it and trying to emulate that in your own life with your own, like, say, personal spin, but not like just not making idols out of these people, but taking the good, understanding the faults,
Hmm.
discerning the two, then doing that over and over again with different people. And that's why you can kind of upgrade in different domains, such as, say, like physical health or speaking, like public speaking, say, and confidence and all that. So just taking that from like a wide variety of sources, not just consuming one person and just being stuck on that person. And obviously, over the course of your life, those role models will and those people will change. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I
and I
want.
think
Hmm.
I think like if there is one person that you 100% agree with 100% of the time, like I think that's BS. Like I don't
Yeah.
think that even exists. Like I think no matter how much you look up to somebody or you're friends with somebody, there's something that there's going to be a disagreement about. And
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be, I mean, as you and I always have our conversations, like it's not like a confrontational thing. It's just something you disagree with. Like, oh, I don't like that about that person.
Hmm.
So, I'm going to take this attribute and this aspect of themselves. And then that's one thing I like to say, like all the guys I look up to, like Jesse Itzler, David
Hmm.
Goggins, even Joe Rogan or Andy or Sean, like just taking aspects I like from those individuals and then molding Anthony into
Yeah.
whoever I want it to be.
Yeah, no, well said, man. Well, while like closing up, I want to ask you like just final thoughts on like the state of how things are and where like the state of things are in society and where you like things to go. Like obviously we talked about a lot of the negative downfall kind of places where society's going, but where you personally would like to see things change, and
Hmm.
where do you think that's like the possible, and how you could play a role, and
Yeah,
everyone too.
right. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, I mean, we talked about it, controlling what you can.
Mm-hmm.
Like starting taking care of your health, taking care of your physical health, taking care of your mental health. If you need help, I'm glad to help. Hit
Mm-hmm.
me up on Instagram or social media and Facebook. I'd be glad to help. Right. Um, if you're, like, it's hard for people to reach out for help. So start drinking more water. Start eating whole foods, foods that are here before us. Meats
Mm-hmm.
and veggies and you know things like that. And on the greater scheme of things, it's like just start being friendly with your neighbors, start talking to the people in your area. I know one thing that you do, Dan, that I love is volunteer your time on a Saturday to give back to the community that you're living in. And I absolutely love that thought, to be a part of something bigger. I think what I would love to see this country do is move more towards um, like back to American made, and back to taking care of one another, caring for each other. It doesn't matter what religious beliefs, what political beliefs, what color your skin is. Like, I get my eggs from the Fox Chase farm from
Mm-hmm.
John. That's his name. I go and buy eggs from him every Saturday, instead of going down to the local big grocery store
Mm-hmm.
and getting food there. I Tanner's. There's another farmers market that I'll go to get produce and meats and things like that. And um, I think shopping local, you know, talking with your neighbors, doing some things together, taking care of your community, taking care of your environment, taking care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
But that always starts with taking care of yourself first. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't do those other things. You know that saying, you can't pour from an
Yeah.
empty. But that's where I like to see this country go, and just more so prioritizing us, small, like small businesses,
Mm-hmm.
the mom and pop shops, moving away from the big corporations, and just starting to build back, like, what has been lost with technology and with the lockdowns and things
Mm-hmm.
like that we lost over the last couple decades. And um, yeah, and just really fight back for for the best version of ourselves.
Sure, man. Well, appreciate your time here today. For everyone listening in, longer episode, but no, I like those ones. It's a nice flowing conversation like we had.
For sure. Yeah, I
All right,
appreciate y'all
man.
for listening. I
For
appreciate you
sure.
for having me, Dan.
Of course, man. My pleasure. All right. Talk to you soon, guys.